This council meeting will be webcast, and I remind all those present that their words and actions will be broadcast to a wider audience, and certain conduct is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Should any person not wish to be recorded, I advise they should leave the meeting room prior to any statements being made. Any defamatory statements?
That's me taking photographs in the public gallery.
Hey,
It's not permitted.
not permitted.
Excuse me, sir. You're not permitted to take photographs in the council meeting without permission of the council.
You might delete
Only the
that.
council's permitted to take photos.
Beg your pardon?
Only the council's permitted.
We have those deleted.
I have no idea what he said.
Only the council's allowed photos.
Because we've got the video running for the
Is
webcast.
that not taking photos, the webcast?
That's us doing that, sending it out to the wider
Well, there you
community.
go.
You don't have permission to take photos in here. I'll move on and say any defamatory statements made are not the position of council and remain in individual's opinion. Council accepts no responsibility for any defamatory statements, and all liability remains with the person making those.
For all eternity, and the hereafter, according to this sign, now known or
Kick him out.
Excuse me,
media now known or hereafter device.
excuse me, if you're going to continue, I'll have to ask you to move.
Guys, you could be stabbed.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable with this gentleman being here. Is there any chance we get them removed?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
I don't feel it's appropriate.
Can we get them removed? That
Yes.
gentleman is uncomfortable and ask if we can have that other person removed.
And a photo.
Well,
Okay.
yes, me can direct.
I'll direct that to happen, and I've got security here to.
I'll go on, that's fine. I'll come back.
Who's that?
When the media responds after 1 month to inquiry about their signs.
Council
What?
signs. Oh, they put the signs in the street. They'll then.
You know what he's talking about?
Are they the signs?
Councillors and members of the public, we'll now continue to move on, and I'll call on Councillor Mark Sutherland to do an acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say Yama Rei Gomoroi, Walla Bagniani, Winugalawa, Lambo Mari, Mauro Mara, Ngalai Down. Dilia Yanbali, Gary Maris Gaingal, Gomoroi Gamlanginda, with Nalanginda, Winangalawa. And that's the language spoken by my family and our community here across the region, acknowledging the country that we are on, which is the land of the Gomeroi people, and making sure that we pay respects to our elders who have cared and still care for this country. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sutherland. I'll ask all those wishing to stand and for the council prayer, and I'll invite Jeff Flynn from the Uniting Church to deliver the prayer tonight, please.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we humbly ask you to bestow your blessing upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the Tamworth Regional Council and Australia. Amen.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll declare the meeting open. Move on to the agenda. Apologies and leaves of absence. We're all here, so there is no apologies and leave of absence required. Move on to item 2, community consultation. We have one person registered to speak to the councillors tonight on item 7.2. I'll ask Daniel Healy if you'd like to come to the lectern and please give your presentation.
I'll be very brief. In all honesty, I was more reserving a place in case I need to rebuttal any other inquiry. So it was just in relation to the proposed amendments of the ECP, the draft ECP change, and I was just in support of those amendments. That was it. Very short and sweet.
Thank you. Councillors, we'll move from here on to item 3, which is minutes from the previous meeting. Could I have somebody move they are a true and correct record? Councillor Mears, second Councillor Tickle. Any comments or questions about those minutes? There being no further comments on those minutes or questions, I'll put that motion forward if they be approved as a true and correct record. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. We'll move from there on to item 4, disclosures of interest. Do we have any disclosures of interest? Councillor Southwood.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to raise a less than significant non-pecuniary interest just relating to the housing strategy. We have got I own with my husband a real estate agency, Southwell Property. And it will be impacted, I guess, by things such as the housing strategy, but I will be remaining in the room. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further disclosures of interest? There being no further disclosures, I'll move on to item 5, a Merrill minute. There is no Merrill minute tonight. I'll move on to item 6. We have a notice of motion. We do have a notice of motion, and I'll call on Councillor Mark Sutherland to move that notice of motion.
Yep, happy to move it.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Coates. Do you want to speak to that?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor. I'm excited to bring this notice of motion forward that Tamworth Regional Council formally endorse the signing of an MOU with TACO, which is the Tamworth Aboriginal Community Controlled Organisations. I believe that this MOU would serve multiple benefits, not only to us as an organisation, but also to provide better service delivery right across the region. Last fortnight, 2 weeks ago during NAIDOC week, I was joined by fellow councillors and some TRC staff at the presence of the New South Wales Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, who made a visit to town. The Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, Linda Burney, was an apology for that because it was a significant moment. It was a significant moment where the state government signed a formal MOU with a place-based Aboriginal governance system called TACO to really not only legitimise that structure, but make sure that as a community there is a government-endorsed framework to make sure that services and actions can be coordinated through place-based genuine consultation. Tamworth was chosen as one of 6 locations to have this type of governance structure across the country. And so this kind of approach is new, a new way to make sure that governments are working effectively with community. And traditionally, the connection between local community, as we know, and state and federal governments have been disconnected at times. So this is an exciting time to be able to change that model. And I think that it's the most logical step for us moving forward in our endeavours to create a local closing gap strategy, and also to make sure that we work with and consult with community in an effective basis, that we take advantage of a model that exists, and to have the state government sign an MOU with TACO, to have local government move into that partnership only enhances and makes our region more attractive to attract resources to deliver more appropriate services directed by the community. So I ask my fellow councillors to support this motion.
Do we have anyone wishing to speak against that recommendation? Further comments on that recommendation?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a comment to say that for myself as a non-Aboriginal person, I believe that it would offer a culturally safe platform for consultation within the Aboriginal community for the creation of an appropriate closing the gap strategy. Because I don't believe the strategy can be developed without input from the community, and reaching the community would come with its challenges, as Councillor Sutherland said. However, through the TACO, Council would have access to the community and its leaders in that culturally safe place and be able to achieve a more meaningful and appropriate closing the gap strategy for the Aboriginal people of our area. So my personal opinion that as a council that we work towards the activities and actions that are required to develop the closing the gap strategy.
Further comments, councillors? Councillor Mears.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'd just like to commend Councillor Sutherland for bringing us to our council meeting. It was a proud moment when we raised the issue previously on our council being the first in the state to have a closing the gap strategy. So I think this is just another stepping stone forward. If it enhances the interactions between the Aboriginal community and the non-Aboriginal community, I think that's a wonderful thing. And as Councillor Coates said, that those discussions will be led by the community themselves. I think it's to the betterment of the council area.
Further comments, councillors? There being no further comments, Councillor Rodder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a question. A lot of reports that we have often mention financial implications. Are there any with this at all?
Through you, Mr Mayor, no financial implications in signing the MOU, but the actions once the MOU has been determined, which will come back to council, there could be financial implications then in any commitment we make through the MOU.
But none with the recommendation.
None through this.
Yeah.
Further comments or questions? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Councillors, we'll move from there into item 7 in open council reports, and I have item 7.1. Could I have a move and a second? A move, Councillor Tickle, second Councillor Mears. Councillor Tickle, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. The housing strategy, which has we have before us, the draft one for adoption tonight, has had input from across the community and, of course, from our staff. This is another positive way to move forward with the options that are included in there to increase our housing supply and diversity to help support community needs. For example, the ageing population, and as the graph you would see in there, we are an ageing population. We're also a lower household population of 2.4 people per household, and of course that means there are many single dwellers amongst that statistic. So we need to be considering all of these needs in our planning. Temporary workers, we've also aimed at addressing some of those needs, social and affordable housing, downsizers and CBD living. It's very encouraging to know that we have a DA approved for CBD living, because many downsizers choose that and many professional people choose that. Our community is diverse, so therefore we need diverse housing. The support of housing in smaller communities is more than commendable, because we're all on the same page with that and wanting to try to support and grow our small communities. And the provision for secondary considerations for secondary dwellings in rural areas is also something that has been, the feedback has that people have been wanting that for many years, so that has also been addressed. Infill housing and Western North Tamworth zones. With the submissions, you will have noticed there was one submitter who said there was an opportunity to further extend our infill housing zone to Matthews Street in the western zone. In that vicinity, there are many blocks of 1,000 square metres, some 1,200 square metres, and with our new guidelines, some of those blocks would even facilitate, so 4 townhouses, dwellings anyway on that block, or 1,000 square metres would allow 3. And West Tamworth is in walking distance to most services, supermarkets, school, and so on. I believe, however, the infill, the extension of the infill will be considered in our local environment plan, because it is a very strong point, because it is a lot of land that could be used. So, active transport's been considered. That's something that we've all been striving to link up our city and also our outlying towns to make active transport more available. Sustainable buildings and places, a lot of work has been done on this over the years, and for example, light roofs, green spaces, water capture and recycle have all been addressed in here. So well done to the staff, and also thank you to all the many submitters.
Anyone wishing to speak against that recommendation?
Wanting to move an amendment?
You can move an amendment.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, just looking to move an amendment, which is just to, as it is printed, but with some additions to item 3, please, which is on the screen. So, do you want me to speak to that?
Yeah, read it too.
Yeah, so so it's exactly as it's printed, but item 3, we're adding in there that we request that the remaining funds are utilised towards actually implementing some of the actions within the Tamworth Regional Housing Strategy. If the request is not approved, we then continue on, expend the remaining funds on the graphic design. So the idea around that is just
Do I have
that,
a seconder for that?
yep,
Do I have a seconder for the amendment?
I'm happy to.
Councillor Burke, now you can speak. Continue to speak.
yeah, just the idea around that is that I think it's a fair bit of money really that's unspent, and I think the community would prefer that those funds are actually going towards implementing the actions within the strategy. There's obviously a range of actions there. Some are pretty much no cost to our council, some require a small cost, and others require a larger amount of funds towards it. But I think it would go a long way, some of that money, towards implementing, for example, the Public Art Fund, which is item 4.1 and 4.2, implementing some of the outcomes of our heat mapping that we've done and our heat strategy. So that's the idea around that. But as we all know, with some of these grants, they may say, I'm very sorry, we've got strict guidelines around how this can be spent. So the idea around this motion or amendment is just to say, look, let's try and request the funds to be spent on implementing it. If they say no, we'll carry on with the summary document.
Anyone wishing to speak against the amendment? Understanding the amendment is now what we're talking about, not the motion as it's printed. Anyone wish to speak against that? Any further? Councillor Summers?
Yeah, just a question regarding the amendment. I am a fan of having a summary document created to make sure that the communication to community is as open and user-friendly as possible. I think when you look at some of these strategies, they're a bit overwhelming in not so much jargon, but pages and pages of important information that can be simplified. If we were to use those funds to move on implementing some actions, which I think is a great idea, can we also make sure that that summary document is still created through our comms team to make sure that that can be a community asset to make sure that plan is simplified? So a question, I guess, Mr Mayor, is with that amendment, is that putting a line through the summary document, or the summary document still occurs?
I'll ask the director, would that put a line through that?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it just means that the summary document won't be as
Polished.
well presented as it would have been. We'll still, and we will make sure there is a summary document, because I think there's a lot of members in the community who are going to find that easier. It just won't be of the quality that it would have been had we spending the remaining funds in total on that.
Further comments? Councillor Kay?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, I would like to ask if that is what Councillor Southwell was actually going to say, because requests that the remaining funds are utilised towards implementing the plan, and if the request is not approved, expend the remaining unspent grant funds on graphic design. I'm just wondering if that is what you were trying to say, or whether it was the other way round you were trying to say.
No, that is right, because from expend, it's exactly as written in our document. So it's saying, let's use the funds on implementing it, and if that's not not approved, yes.
Councillor Kay, oh sorry.
Mr Mayor, I just might clarify that because it's grant funds, and I know Councillor Southwell did allude to that, but because this whole project is grant funded, we will have to go to the Department of Planning and say we now wish to spend the remaining funds on commencing implementation. Now, the grant was for the preparation of the strategy, so it is possible that the department will say no, but we will certainly put forward to the department Councillor Wish and Council's resolution, if it is, to use the funds to commence implementation.
Do you wish to continue on with your amendment?
For you, I guess if the outcome was that they're creating a plan, I would imagine that the government department would be very happy to see that the plan is actually implemented. So, it may be something where they say no, and in which case the amendment covers the fact that we can then go along with the summary document.
But we won't have the money to do it.
We will, because they can still say yes to the summary document. So what our director is saying is we can ask for the funds to be implementing, the 20,000 I think it was. If they say no, we can still go ahead with the summary. So it's a win-win outcome here, really.
Further comments, councillors? Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just Look, I'm happy to support the item 7.1, but I just want to make a few comments. The most glaring issue with this housing strategy and Blueprint 100 and growth generally for our region, particularly for Tamworth City, Katinga and Moombi, is that it is entirely reliant on water security, and little has happened in that space since the 2017-2020 drought. How are we going to ensure our region's water security and sustain a population of 80 to 100,000 people? As stipulated in Priority 1, provide for sustainable growth that is supported by infrastructure collaboration on water security. There appears currently to be no desire to amend the water management legislation, the Peel Valley Water Sharing Plan, construct pipelines to existing dams west of Tamworth, or deliver a bigger slice of the 2016 augmented Chaffey Dam. Indeed, in 2016, we were told the augmentation of Chaffey Dam would secure Tamworth's water future, but apparently it didn't deliver us one extra drop of water security. And as we saw during that drought, we almost approached dead storage of that dam. Although there are a lot of good suggestions in the Namoi Regional Water Strategy of 2023, nothing concrete has come of the suggestions as yet. In relation to Priority 2, increasing diversity and choice in housing, and Priority 3, improve housing affordability and reduce housing costs, while it focuses on lot size, permissible uses, floor space ratios and parking requirements, it impacts the amenity of those subdivisions, with car owners likely to park on footpaths, limiting opportunities to cooling of streets with trees.
Can I raise a point of order?
Yes, Mr.
Mr Chair, we're discussing it. I'm sorry for interrupting my fellow Councillor Rodder, but we're discussing the amendment, and that I believe that the amendment should be put before we go back into the motion proper. I know it's only a small adjustment to it, but I think that we're discussing now the entire motion rather than the amendment to it. And I would request that. The amendment is put.
I'll take that on notice, Councillor Burke, and I'll give request if I have a second that the amendment be put. Councillor Southwell. I'll put the amendment. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carries. So we're going back to the motion now, which is the amendment as moved. Now, Councillor Rodder, you can now speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Burke. So in relation to Priority 2, increasing diversity and choice in housing, and Priority 3, improve housing affordability and reduce housing costs, while it focuses on lot size, permissible uses, floor space ratios and parking requirements, it impacts the amenity of those subdivisions, with car owners likely to park on footpaths, limiting opportunities to cooling of streets with trees, but most importantly, it won't deliver cheaper houses. When Council retrospectively approved lot size reductions in the Moore Creek subdivisions, Oaklands Estate, Namingar and now Arcadia Hillview, the prices of parcels of land didn't magically reduce. For example, at Moore Creek, a large parcel of land of 2,122 square metres cost the owner $320,000, and just across the road, a block with an area of just 1,035 square metres cost $255,000, just $65,000 less for half the area. That was as a direct result of Council reducing lot sizes of properties following prompting by developers in that area.
Councillor Rodder, is that relevant to the recommendation we're talking about? I'm not sure that it is.
Well, I think it is, Mr Mayor. I'm trying to explain that not everything will be hunky-dory with this policy, and some of the changes that we may make.
That housing policy, that what you're talking about, won't be impacted on with this housing policy we're talking about tonight, will it?
Sorry, so in relation to what I'm just saying, we are saying in part of the strategy that we're going to reduce the size of, we're going to have a range of options in terms of lot sizes, and therefore we might have a lot cheaper homes. I'm trying to demonstrate that is not always the case, Mr Mayor.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people that don't really think that the prices of each lot will reduce dramatically, making homes cheaper, and these haven't even had a 400 to 500,000 home constructed on them. I fear some of this strategy appears to favour the bank accounts of developers. I do think that manufactured homes, caravans and modular homes are serious options for the future generations when housing affordability is way out of reach of average Australians. But I know such options should be subject to approval, compliance and aesthetics. In relation to priority 4, facilitate livable communities, this will be also impacted by small lot developments where there will be limited opportunities, as I mentioned, to grow trees and reduce heat banks. More lots will reduce the area for large trees and increase the urban heat when we face the next 40-degree summer. In relation to priority 5, promote rural communities, we should be very careful imposing lifestyle living opportunities on our smaller communities, as we've seen in Continual, not overly popular. It could easily be to the detriment of adjoining landholders who will lose the quiet enjoyment and amenity of their properties. And I can tell you unequivocally that no one wants more enclaves of disadvantage, which will come should we allocate entire subdivisions to affordable and social housing. Tamworth already has its fair share of them, and more work needs to be done in this area. The other challenges of Council's blueprint and this housing strategy is a lack of support from the major parties in government that comprise the state government. I am not aware of any primary or high schools being planned for our region. Our health system is in a state of crisis. We have serious antisocial and crime challenges and a lack of will to tackle that problem, taking the gloss of living in a rural regional area, and as mentioned, existing residents don't want more enclaves of disadvantage. If you need evidence of lack of investment, look at the proposed Gunnagunoo Road upgrade promised in 2019 and re-promised again last year, and we're still waiting.
That's totally not in line with what we're talking about here, the Gunnagunoo Road.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll leave that. Other challenges include building approval delays, obviously there's concern in the building community about delays to their developments. But I hope that in the fullness of time, this will, potentially address some of those issues and we can move on.
Further comments, councillors? Councillor
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I actually support this recommendation, and I think the housing strategy is a crucial document. However, I also consider it to be a line in the sand, if you like, at the moment, just to inform the future and to enable identifying and addressing the housing shortage with flexibility. I understand the confines of the strategy at this point in time, and also the constraints around Council's part in addressing housing inadequacies and shortages. However, it doesn't actually, from what I've been able to read, the short and medium term addressing, the actions are basically in administration, investigation, reviews and advocacy. Having read through the 25 submissions from the public exhibitions, I noted that there was significant support and recognition of the need for the strategy and some excellent recommendations. And I was also interested to see the online community survey, Have Your Say, had 351 contributions, which I thought was really quite a good spread over the community. Some of the amendments that come out of the public exhibitions and community consultations have been productive in that they have provided clarification around some of the areas. I think it's also important to note that housing is a complex beast with many associated strategic considerations, both internal and external, as noted by the agency submissions, as well as significant influence and control by state government regulations and legislations. And these things will impact on the speed of the progress. But as I said at the beginning, we're drawing a line in the sand and we've got somewhere where we're actually able to move forward there. I guess one of the things I did note that Council's role in terms of temporary worker accommodation for renewable energy construction and agricultural projects, Council's role is quite limited, and it's limited to collaborating with the Department of Housing and Infrastructure. And I've also stated before that these projects are likely to have far-reaching impacts beyond our current residents and our potential growth for future residents. And if I could just finish off, Mr Mayor, with one general comment, and it's in regards to the public exhibition of this document and other documents. And I believe there was quite a number of strategies that were on exhibition and asking for submissions and feedback over a 6-week period. And some of those documents were quite complex, and consequently, a lot to expect from the community to read, understand and comment on. And the housing strategy was one of those. But overall, I support the strategy, and as I said, we now have a line in the sand and some direction as where we're going forward from here. Thank you.
Further comments, councillors? Councillor Southfield.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just very briefly, I think my fellow councillors have covered off on a lot, but I think this is a very, very, very important strategy for Tamworth Regional Council. We obviously have a housing shortage throughout Australia. It's great that we have pulled this together quite quickly. And it really will set the tone for our region for many, many years to come. I think that housing or shelter is really one of our basic needs. And if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's right at the bottom. It's the most important thing. And I think to improve on housing affordability, which I disagree with my councillor Rodder, suggesting that it won't increase housing affordability. I think if you've got a lot size that can be divided into a range of different housing options that are smaller and can also be Torrens title, I think that it's going to be cheaper to create and build, and therefore that flow-on cost will mean that it will be cheaper for the consumer. I think it will reduce housing costs for people. I think the diversity and choice in housing is very important, particularly for our older citizens within our community, who many of whom are living in 4 or 5 bedroom houses. And simply because there is a lack of supply for those smaller properties. So I think it's great to see this. It's also very, very important though. I do agree with Councillor Rodder in terms of our water security, because without that, it's very, very hard to implement this housing strategy. And also just to take note as well around the livable community side of it, I think making sure that our region is livable will mean that people want to come here. If we have work, people will want to come here, but we also need to make sure it's livable, that we have the public art, the schools, the education, that, you know, we have a lot of the livable sides of our community we're struggling with it. The health system, education, even our entertainment precincts as well are also kind of at capacity. So we need to make sure that our livable side, we're trying to keep up with it. And I think our aquatic centre is a great example of where we are trying to do that. But this is a really important strategy for us, and I think it will be crucial in many years to come. Thank you.
Councillor Mears.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'd just like to thank the team that put this together. It was a really exciting night when it was first proposed to us. I do hope a number of concerns, as well as cases, we draw a line in the sand, but I hope that line doesn't stop us. And those concerns with water security. And as Councillor Rodder said, just because we offer up smaller blocks of land, it doesn't mean that someone's going to make housing affordable. So that's something we really have to watch as a council. You know, we've seen it in other areas. You drive down the highway past of the entrance to Newcastle now on 450 blocks. I mean, you can't stick a cat out the window without it looking in the neighbour's house. Those houses aren't any cheaper. It's availability of land that's the bigger issue, that unless there's more and more land made available, we'll go smaller and smaller and smaller, and that'll bump those prices up, especially if we've got a target of 100,000 people in from our Blueprint 100. You know, we can squeeze them in, but it'll keep pushing the prices up and up and up. We've seen that over the last 2 or 3 years of house prices in Tamworth, and great if you've got one, but if you're a young couple starting out looking for a house, the prices are just astronomically going higher and higher and higher, way past CPI and people's ability to pay. So as much as I really think this is a great starting point, we have to be very, very careful of giving permission to drop down to 450 blocks. And those alone, not even if you're trying to create some kind of enclave, certainly make those areas look like that. And as Councillor Rodder said, with the putting in smaller and smaller roads, all of that does is bump the profit up for the developers, because they can stick more houses in on a block of land. So not all developers are greedy, but I've seen plenty that are. And most areas where, you know, smaller blocks of land, take Sydney for example, you know, you can buy a closet now for about $400,000 if you're lucky. So, yeah, great starting point. We've got to start somewhere, but moving forward, I think council, whether it's us here or the new council, have to be very, very careful on the approval of, small block subdivisions.
Councillor Sutherland.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor, and in full support of the recommendation and the strategy. I think it has the potential of creating generational change, supporting our community across the board to achieve what's known as the Australian dream, but also to support members of our most vulnerable communities. I want to make sure, congratulate staff for the thorough community consultation, and just for the record also to make sure that we mention that this strategy of its kind, first of its kind here for Tamworth Regional Council, was fully funded by government funding, out of the New South Wales Regional Housing Strategic Planning Strategy. So again, a vital strategy that's going to shape our region for the future, and not having to come out of the pockets of community, I think is important to point out.
Further comments, councillors? Being no further comments, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Councillors, we'll move on to 7.2. Council Development Control Plan. Do I have a mover? Councillor Bed, second Councillor Coates. Councillor Best, do you wish to speak to that?
No, Mr.
Anyone wish to speak against that recommendation? Further comments on that recommendation? Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to make a note that it was interesting that some of the amendments that were made in response to one or two submissions, and I think that should indicate to participants that not only have they been heard, but acknowledged with those appropriate amendments. And there were other amendments made after the submissions from organisations like the LALC, Transport for New South Wales, Heritage New South Wales, Department of Environment and Water, and that shows a diversity of consultation and subsequently providing clarity in some areas. So thank you, Mr Mayor.
Further comments, councillors?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just a quick one, just in support of the recommendation to concur with Councillor Coates. I think it was great to see the level of community input into the strategy, and the amendments made were really clarified and changed and made sure that was driven by community. And now I think that the amendments and the changes to the DCP that's drawn up provides a really clear set of actionable guidelines that can support development, but also making sure that it supports environmental sustainability, as well as, bang for buck and financial feasibility for the community and for the organisation.
Further comments, councillors? There being no further comments, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Councillors, will now move through the agenda onto item 8, infrastructure and services. There is no report in item 8, so we move straight into item 9, governance, strategy and finance. Do I have a mover for 9.1, please? Councillor Mears, second Councillor Sutherland. Councillor Mears, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Anyone wish to speak against that? You wish to speak against it?
Yes.
Councillor Coates?
Mr Mayor, if I could certainly at least make a comment. And while I wholeheartedly support this event for what it will bring for the 300 children who are anticipated to attend, and please don't get me wrong, I wholeheartedly support that. However, when I clarified the host and the organiser, they're the same entity as the New South Wales Department of Education, I cannot support the requested fee waiver. And I acknowledge that the amount is only $1,500. But, the department selected Tamworth to come here because the Sports Dome is an ideal venue. And I also note that the $1,500 is to come out of the Sport and Rec operational budget. And I think we've seen the impact of what's happening in that budget later on in our papers. But more importantly, this is the same government that regularly cost shifts to local government. And the requested $1,500 could be utilised for another project or provided to an organisation that does not have the same depth of pockets. So I want to reconfirm, I support the event, most definitely, but I'm really struggling with actually subsidising the state government by giving them a fee waiver for this.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further comments, councillors? Councillor
Only to say that's a very valid point that's been raised by Councillor Coates, and it is key that it does say New South Wales Department of Education. So that's who we're subsidising. It doesn't make sense.
Further comments, councillors?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I am in support of the recommendation in regards to the request from staff to use funds to support this event. National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Day is a significant event on the national calendar that is, I know it says Department of New South Wales Education. It's a national event, but the feasibility and the justification that staff have really put forward, I think, builds a strong case to say, this is an opportunity to get Play School to come to Tamworth. And Play School is the longest running, having a 3-year-old myself. I'm quite up to date with ABC Kids, and to have Tamworth put on the radar within Play School and across, national TV and broadcasting for as long as Play School runs their reruns, I think the staff have made a really valid point in the justification, just in the regards to profile building, the marketing, to be able to make sure that Tamworth is seen as a place that supports early childhood learning, and the justification that staff have put forward to use that budget seems rational, and I am in support of the recommendation as it stands.
Further comments, councillors? Councillor Rodda.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When I initially read the report, I did think, New South Wales Department of Education probably has got a lot more money than we do, but I think we're probably meaner than second skimmings if we actually oppose $1,500, so I will support it.
Further comments, councillors? Councillor.
Oh, I thought you put it there. Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think Councillor Sutherland's comments are quite fitting. It will bring a spotlight onto Tamworth, which is always a good thing. And although it's not a government department, we do spend about $20,000 every year bringing rugby league into town of ratepayers' money, and that's determined, but we get national coverage, the news, the sport, which again is beneficial to Tamworth. So again, $1,500 to support children as opposed to a rugby league game from a very well-off and buoyant company, I think is trivial, really. Well, not trivial, but it's a very low amount of money to get a similar type coverage as does the rugby league. So I'm fully in support of the motion.
That closes the debate. Councillor Mears, you moved the motion, so that closes the debate. Okay. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Councillors, we'll move on to item 9.2. I'll move in a second, please. Move Councillor Southwell, second to Councillor Best. Councillor Southwell, do you wish to make any comment?
Just to say, just briefly, just to say it is very exciting that this will be, this conference will be coming to Tamworth. How good. And I'm happy to put my hand up as a voting delegate if necessary. But very much looking forward to hosting the New South Wales conference. Thanks.
Councillor Southwell, this conference will be in November.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Thank you.
You don't know.
No, I've changed my mind. I'm out.
You can come along as a guest.
Councillors, there's a recommendation in front of us, and it's pretty clear, the 3 points. Is there anyone wishing to speak against that? Any further comments on that? It's probably a bit premature for anyone to suggest that they might like to be there or be a voting delegate. So could I ask you, so there's no further comments, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried.
Councillors, just to clarify, so that we can secure early bird registrations and so on, so we have to resolve that the Mayor and the councillors are going to attend so that we can actually have the places reserved and so on, and then when the new council is elected, we'll obviously bring them back for the nomination for the voting delegate.
Thank you.
Councillors, we'll move on to item 9.3. Move to Councillor Betts, second to Councillor Case. Councillor Betts, you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. It gives me a great pleasure to move this. It always does, the place management, the 355 committees. They are the fabric of a lot of our community. They really are the engine room, and they're the unsung heroes. They're right across our council area, and ever since I've been in local government, they really punch above their weight. The amount of money that is generated by these groups and then the actual outcome is just absolutely phenomenal. But one thing, when I read there was 17 sets of minutes that we had to look at and approve tonight, is that there are quite a number of them that are beyond the delegation of the 355 committees. And I know we go out and do our community consultation with the pop-ups around the area, and over the years sometimes we get a handful, sometimes we get a few more. But I really see that probably the future council probably should look at the mechanism with the 355 committees, because they are the people that turn up, they do the work, they know what's beneficial for their local community. So I would urge the future council to relook at the terms of delegation and the process in which those community groups can actually give feedback to council on the matters of what is really affecting them in the community. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Anyone wish to speak against that recommendation? Any further comments on the recommendation? Councillor Coates?
Mr Mayor, I wouldn't be me if I didn't make a comment on these reports that come back, so I do apologise. But I also want to thank the volunteers and the committee members, as well as the place managers, who actually provide the guidance and assistance, as well as being the conduit between the community groups and the council. So just to acknowledge that, thank you.
Thank you. Further comments, councillors? There being no further comments, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Councillors, now move on to item 9.4. Can I have a move and a seconder? Move Councillor Southwell, seconded Councillor Burke. Councillor Southwell, you wish to make comment? Anyone wish to speak against the report? Further comments? Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, it's noted that 26 million of the federal government assistance grants is included there, which is, I'm understanding, is an annual payment made to us.
Correct.
Is that right? And that's at that, is it 0.5%, am I correct, of the GDP?
Through Mr Mayor, because that's very close, councillor.
And
it depends obviously on what the GDP is near the year, so it can fluctuate between 0.48 through to 0.53.
And I guess my reason for standing and speaking is to reiterate, to reinforce, to advocate in terms of, I know that this council has taken to local government conference and in hand with a lot of other local governments to try and get that share of GDP to go to a higher level, because we can see what a significant number it is now, and how if that was bolstered by a small percentage, what it could end up being. Such an important part of our operation. It is recurring funding, and it's the area in which, as a council, we've been struggling with our grants because we don't know that they're all predictable, particularly the ones that are for particular projects. So I just think it needed attention drawing to it, and urge and encourage us to not let up the fight to try and get a greater percentage of that back at local council level.
Councillor Burke, we have been fighting for many years to try and lift that from 0.5% up to 1%, and I think the ALGA and also every council, 547 of them, all want the same outcome. We just don't think we'll convince the government of either side that that's what we need to do. Further comments, councillors? Further comments, Councillor Coates?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I totally agree with what Councillor Burke has said, but also just for general reminder to people, although our fund may look very healthy, there's actually only about 7.5% of that money that is unrestricted. So the other amount of that money has already been nominated to be used elsewhere, and I think that's an important thing for not just council, but probably more so the community to be aware of and to remember. And I also note, just making a note, that there's about 90% of our investments that are going to be turned over in the next 12 months, which is a significant amount. Thank you.
Further comments, councillors? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. We'll move on to 9.5, annual operational budget variations. We'll move in the seconder. Move Councillor Betts, seconder Councillor Burke. You want to speak to that, Councillor Betts?
No, Mr Mayor.
Anybody want to speak against the recommendation? Further comments on the recommendation? No comments. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Councillors, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's community services. There is nil reports in community services, which means we move to item 11, reports to be considered in closed council. And I'll ask the General Manager, has anyone requested any of those reports in closed council to be held in open council? Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to see a closed council matter moved to open council? That not being the case, I would then ask, could I have a motion to move into closed council? Councillor Scuffle, seconded Councillor Coates. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
We'll move into closed council. On the note
The end of it.
Bring in the rubble.
Trying to get away with it.
We get a mention.
No,
Yeah, take your photo.
gotta put your hand up like this.
Oops.
Mr General Manager, report on the matters in closed council.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, this is the report of the closed session of the ordinary council meeting held on the 23rd of July 2024. In closed council this evening, you considered 7 items of business. Items 12.1 through 12.6 were adopted as per the business paper. A slight amendment to item 12.7 relating to the organics recycling facility with Roman numeral 6 of the recommendation having wording inserted to seek a minimum of $20 million funding from the state and federal government.
Thank you, Mr General Manager. I'd call for a motion to accept. Councillor Burke, second to Councillor Southwell. All those in favour?